storytelling to bring us together and generate change within ourselves and the world. Before saying a few things about Marius today, I would like to thank our partners and co-organizers, Northwest Film Forum, for hosting the festival. Also our festival partners, UiPath Foundation, and our institutional partners, the Romanian Culture Institute and For Culture. Also the many private donors and local sponsors who helped us make this happen, and the community partners all over the US who promoted the event. So Marius Olteanu studied film directing in Bucharest and in the UK. He focuses on the clash between private and social life and the boundaries between the two, always trying to explore what lies beyond the perfect surface of things and finding new cinematic ways to convey the struggle with one's own limit. And I think his first feature film that you saw, Monsters, clearly pushes us to question what we take at face value, what we take for granted. Also, Marius worked as assistant director with Cristi Puiu for his Sierra Nevada. Maybe he can tell us more at some point about that. He made a few shorts before making Monsters. Monsters is based on a short, actually. So maybe you can tell us more about the difference and how this project evolved. Besides working as a director, he's also a published photographer. And I'm gonna try to share my screen and show you one of his photographs. Okay, so this is the poster of the film Monsters. And I would like to start our discussion today from the poster itself. So if you can, I'm gonna stop sharing. Marius, you seem a master of creating frames. And in English, I can play with the word and kind of framing your viewers. Framing viewers in English for the Romanian audience means tricking your viewers, right? By creating this poster, there's many things that that come to mind. So what exactly is the key that you propose for us up front, even before seeing the movie? Is the female character, Dana, Mary figure? Is the male character Christ figure? And this could be quite controversial if you think of the fact that he is homosexual or bisexual in the film. So it is a taboo right up front. Is it a commentary on love and sacrifice? It is a visual intertext with the core of Christian doctrine, right? Where we're supposed to love each other and sacrifice for the other, and love our neighbor and forgive everything. What can you say about it, especially in juxtaposition with the title that's Monsters in pink and with a period? There's so many layers of interpretation by just looking at the poster, and then the film comes and it's as rich as the poster. So can you start by commenting a little bit about the choice of this wonderful picture that you made yourself? So
I first wanted to say hi to you and hi to the audience, to the people who are watching us. It's great to be able to show the film like this. So thank you, especially for having the film in the festival. Talking about the poster and what the poster means in regards to the film, I think you touched some very important aspects of what we put into the poster. It is a story about love and sacrifice, and also it is a story about two people who kind of love each other, you know, on a level that's not accessible to everyone. Because I remember when I was giving the script after I finished it for people to read it, and there were a lot of people saying, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't stay with this man, or I don't understand this woman, or, you know, so yes, I think it is behind the poster there is a story about love and sacrifice that is not accessible to everybody. And um, also I think because a lot of people maybe don't understand this kind of relationship, they tend to consider these people monsters, you know, like I think especially in the US, maybe there might be people who can think this title is a very strong one, and maybe, you know, maybe they are special but not necessarily monsters. And I had this discussion with the audience in Berlin and in other places where, let's say, people are more open-minded, but still I think there was still a problem with this topic, you know, even in societies where homosexuality is, let's say, fully accepted, there was still like an itch, you know, a tension there. And I think that's what the poster is doing too. It's kind of mirroring this contrasts, you know, between what we think it's acceptable and between something that we consider beautiful as love is, but in the same time something that's not accessible to everybody, like sacrifice and accepting the other one, even if he or she is not exactly as you would want them to be.
Exactly. So the female figure in the Pieta, if we think of Michelangelo's most famous Pieta, Mary is holding her son. In this picture, Dana, the wife, is holding her husband. And in a way, you know, we can talk about the way in which both of them are monsters, because she's a woman who doesn't have children, and we can talk more about that. And he is a gay man married to Dana. The film started as a collection of interviews. So you researched the topic of love for years, and you came up with a short, and then the short developed into a film. What were you looking for researching love in, you know, in couples?
Well, yes, I was researching love, but in the same time, what interests me, so the starting point for this film was what happens with love after a certain period of time. Because in the beginning, almost all of us experience something beautiful and something that seems that it's going to last forever. And then you realize that not everything is how it seemed to be. And there is compromise there is struggle, there needs to be something there that keeps people together beyond, you know, what was beautiful and bubbly in the beginning. So I was interested in talking to couples that were married for, like, let's say 10 years, 15 years. And I came across a lot of stories, and I was always interviewing people separately, so never together. And I noticed this way that they were keen to share things that sometimes they couldn't even share with their partner. And like this, I came across two couples that were more or less in the situation that is presented in the film. And I was very touched by how much these people were struggling in keeping, you know, the appearances, and in the same time affirming something that I consider real love. So because obviously this is my first feature, I was kind of scared in a way by the fact that the topic seems so big and with so many aspects, that I thought, okay, maybe I start slowly, maybe I don't do the whole film. I had this triptych structure already in mind. So I talked with the producer, with Claudiu Mitcu, and we said, let's do it as a short. Let's do the first part as a short, which we did in 2015. And it was, I think it's very interesting in terms of experience, because after showing the short film, there were tons of questions. There were, like, I remember after screenings, people were coming outside of the cinema, and they were like, but why wasn't she going home? Why wasn't she doing this or that? And so on. So we knew at that point that, okay, if there is this interest there, if people are keen to know what follows, then I think it is a good starting point for a feature film, and we can, you know, we can develop this interest and these questions. And yeah, and I think, in my opinion, I think it was very good. And even now, I assume you didn't see the short, but we presented it just once, both of them. So we presented first the short and then the feature. And I think the short film, you can actually, now if you see them together, you can see that it's in some way sketchier. And now in the feature film, the characters are much more developed, the taxi driver and the wife. So I'm happy that we had the chance and the opportunity, and we were kind of spoiled in a way to be able to do it twice. And in a way, for me, my favorite part is especially this one, because it felt like we did it and then we made it better.
Mm. This is wonderful. And I heard, from what I can understand, is that you had a different cast for the short.
Yes, I mean, I worked differently on this film that I usually do, meaning that I only had casting sessions for the part of Andre, of Arthur, of the husband, and that was a very long and big casting. We've seen like 40 actors, and we did rehearsals with all of them, and it was a very long process. For all the other parts, I've watched films and I went to the theater a lot, and I nominated the actors without going through a casting. So basically, I was calling them and I was saying, look, I have this part for you if you would be interested. And sometimes it was easy and immediate, like I was talking to them and they were like, yeah, sure. And sometimes it was more complicated, like for example, with Sherban Pavlu, who realized instantly that this is going to be a complicated part, and he was tempted in one way, but in the same time, he knew that this would be a part that would raise quite a lot of problems in the audience. So we talked for almost like 6 months until he said, okay, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
And I think I got lost a little bit with all
Yes,
these
yes. So
details. Yes,
how did you
yeah.
choose your actors? Judith State got the Gopo Award for her interpretation for the female lead.
Yes, and you asked me how come there is a different cast in the
Yes,
short, and
yes.
yeah, and I think even though the actress I worked with in the short film was amazing, and I had a very good experience doing the short. I realized then, because at that point when we did the short, I didn't have the husband, I didn't have the actor playing the husband, and then when I picked, finally, after the long casting and everything, I picked the actor for that part. We started doing a lot of rehearsals. I've tried, even we went to a real psychologist, to a therapist, and they had couple sessions. They were like, I was saying, okay, you'll act as if you were the character and you were this couple in the film, and you're going to see a therapist and trying to save your marriage. So we did this, I think, like 4 times or 5 times. And I just felt that in order for this film to work, I needed a really strong chemistry between the two. And with the initial cast, I just felt it wasn't there. So it kind of felt for me a bit like I was having a relationship like the one in the film with my cast. I was really trying to save it, to save this couple, but in the same time I felt that it just wasn't there. So in the end, as difficult as it was, I decided to change the cast. And actually, what I think it's interesting is that we had a rehearsal, which was the scene at the party after the baptizing, and the main actress, the one who was playing Dana before I did the change, wasn't able to be there. So we kind of rehearsed without her. I was rehearsing with the pregnant women, having the chat and so on. And Judith State, who ended up playing Dana, she was there. She was part of that scene. She was one of the women, and she had a certain sadness and remoteness. And after we finished the rehearsal, I talked to her and I said, what was it? What happened there? Because there was something with you that just kept me looking at you all the time, but I didn't know exactly what was happening. And she told me that it was a subject that she wasn't very comfortable with. And we developed a little bit about that. Remember, this was 2 days before we started shooting. Yeah. And that very evening I gave her a call and I said, look, I know this is completely crazy, but what would you think if I would offer you the main part in this film? And would you be able, because obviously it was on a very short notice and the shooting lasted for almost, I mean, we shot for 27 days, but it was over a period of 2 months. So blocking someone for 2 months on a very short notice can be complicated.
Yeah.
And she said, I'll do it. I'll just, it was actually quite funny. She was supposed to go to a wedding in Spain, I think, and we kind of like shifted the schedule a little bit so she can go for 2 days, but in the same time be able to shoot the film. So I'm very happy with how this worked out, and I think she is definitely the character I had in mind. So the Gopo just came as the cherry on the cake.
Definitely, you trusted your gut feeling, and it worked.
Yes, and I think it was a question of trust. Actually, I think Judy trusted me, and I trusted her, and we kind of jumped head first into this. But yeah, it paid off.
Yeah. How difficult or easy was it to find your male actors for the part?
This was very complicated, very, very complicated. Christy Popa wasn't the first choice I had in mind. And I remember the casting director, Simona Ghiță, who happens to be the same casting director as in Sierra Nevada, because you mentioned Cristi Puiu's film earlier. I talked to her and I said, look, I have a very big problem with this part because I know it's a very complicated part. It's, as I said, tempting for a lot of actors, but in the same time, they realize that it might damage their, image, like artistic image and so on. So I asked her help, and we saw actors like, I think it was around 40 actors that we got to see for this part. And I remember on the second week, Simona said to me, but would you like to see Cristi Popa? And I said, no, he's too beautiful. I'm not interested in this. And we kept on seeing actors. And 2 weeks later, she said again, but are you sure you don't want to see Cristi Popa? And I was like, no, he's still too beautiful. Let's just... and we kind of finished the actors, or we thought we did. And I mean, the list that we had. And then she mentioned him again. And I was like, okay, I'll do it for you. Let's just... And he auditioned with the scene that isn't in the film anymore. It was, they were going, him and Dana, they were going to the therapist, and he was remembering in a way a dream that he had involving a metal house and his mother and so on. And it was an amazing audition. I remember I had a problem with that scene because I've seen it played so many times and not in a very good way and not in a very convincing way. So I thought, okay, it's probably poorly written, and I didn't realize that until I seen it acted. And then Christy came, and then he gave an amazing audition, and I was like, okay, so probably this scene actually works, and he was very good. So let's just try and do rehearsals. And we did that. I remember we did it for almost a year. Christy says it was more like 6 months. So maybe he's right. Maybe it seemed longer to me, but it was very complicated because I told you I was looking for a certain chemistry between him and the main actress. But I have to give it to Christy. He was very resilient. He really wanted to play this part, and he just, every time I was saying, I think I need to do another rehearsal, or I think we still haven't found this character, let's do it again. And and I was inventing scenes, and I was like, okay, let's do a scene in the park, and let's do a scene in this garden, and he was all the time there. And yeah, and talking about awards and stuff like this, I think it gives a measure of how complicated this whole process was, when you notice that I think Judith got nominated for every award possible, and in the same time Christy was kind of skipped all the time by the awards, because I think people are confusing sometimes the problems and the, how should I say, the complications of the characters with actually the acting, with a lot, which also a lot of people mention to be very good. So
Yeah. I for this I have a quote from Sherban Pavlu, who plays his date. It's funny that when I'm thinking about it, I realize that people don't have any problem with me playing a serial killer in the HBO series Shadows, but I can already think of some people who are going to have a problem with the fact that I'm playing a gay character.
Yeah, I think he summed it up. He summed up the situation very well. And I remember he said this after we finished a rehearsal, and we were talking, because both of them, both Christy and Sherman, are parents, are fathers. They have, I think, 2 kids each. And they were talking about how it is to be a father, and how it is, to be perceived in a certain way by the people around you. And he said this, and I remember we all went quiet afterwards, and we were like, isn't this a funny world? But yeah, it's the way it is. And actually, I think a lot of Sherban's fan base is based on Shadow, because he portrays there something that, a character that people really like and look up to. And about his character in Monsters, a lot of people said he's a great actor, but this guy is horrible.
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean the scene is really remarkable. I mean the acting is fabulous, and he comes across as I mean, there's like ups and downs, and in the end, I mean, Arthur kind of he is abusive towards Arthur in the end, right? I mean,
I think somebody said this, and I was really happy that it comes across like this, that in a way Sherman's character is a version of Andrei, of Arthur, much later in time, because I think this is what happens to someone, when you're like always trying to hide yourself, always try to pretend you're something you're not. I think it takes a toll. And I don't think Sherman's character is a bad person, but I think after pretending and trying to hide yourself for a very long time, you probably end up being some sort of monster. So
he is trying to control everything, right? Everything.
And also he's lying a lot and pretending a lot. He's like, I like this and I want this, but in the same time, he doesn't want that at all. So yeah. And I think he's an abusive character, but also I told you I don't necessarily blame him. And I was kind of hoping with this scene that there will be a discussion, and there will be questions raised about what society does to an individual, with imposing certain rules. And yeah, and I mean, and with some topics, because one of the very important topics for me was this idea of a woman that doesn't want to have children, which in Romania is still a very thorny subject. And yeah, and looking at what's happening now in Poland with abortion laws and stuff like that, you realize that it's still, sometimes we believe that these topics belong to the past, and then we realize that no, like the state and the people around you trying to control what you do with your body and what you do with your sexuality is still a very present topic.
Exactly. I mean, if you, the film has three parts, right, Dana, Arthur, and then it's the monsters. It's like they're, and when they are together, the way you film is different. There's
Mm-hmm.
room for breathing, because there's like, oh, breathe, you know, when there's too much pressure from society, when they feel that they marginalized, they're very empathic towards one another, because they're, in a way, they're marginalized by society. She is marginalized because she doesn't want children, and she's considered an anomaly, actually. And he is marginalized for his homosexuality. And
Yes.
yeah, so it's so in a way, if you can comment a little bit, so who are the monsters at the end, you know?
Again, someone, and I'm really happy with this, and I think we presented the film. I think the film was in more than 50 festivals, and we traveled a lot. I think it, except Australia, it basically went to every continent and to a lot of countries on every continent. And I was really happy that everywhere I went with the film, I came across very intelligent people and people who were very involved in the film, and we had very good discussions afterwards. And I remember someone said this, that this whole monsters idea, it almost develops like in uh, concentrical circles, because you can say that, okay, the monsters are actually these characters because they hide, because they lie, because they cheat, and so on. But then there comes another circle, a bigger one, and maybe the monsters are the people around them, and the people who are judging them, and the people who are not allowing them to be who they are. And then maybe there is a third circle where the audience can be some kind of monsters, because the audience is part of this society that judges and, you know, pushes on boundaries and on rules and limitations and so on. So I think it depends on it depends on everyone. I mean, I remember someone said at a festival that this is a very strange film and the only normal character in the film is the grandmother. and then I remember he asked me, so who are the monsters? And I said, I think you already labeled them, you know, as monsters, so you probably know already who the monsters are. I think it depends on each, you know, each viewer and on each screening, let's say, who the monsters are.
Yeah.
And for me, they aren't monsters. They are very uh, they aren't simple people, but I think they are people who have a certain sadness and a certain discomfort, and they try to belong, but you know, I think it's difficult, and I almost care for them at a point that I almost like consider them real people. And it's probably also because of the two couples I mentioned that I
Mhm.
met during the interview period. And yeah, I think life is very complicated for those couples, who, by the way, as far as I know, they are still together. So I'm because this was a question that I got to be asked a lot, you know, like if I think they would stay together, you
Yes.
know, and I think everything is possible, and I really think they love each other, which is very important for the film and for the story.
Is this ultimately a film about honesty at the individual level and also the collective level? Because in regards to LGBT rights in Romania and women's bodies, the right not to procreate, um, is this your personal quest and call for action for us to be more honest about what we've been hiding? You know.
I I think they love each other in a very honest way. I think for me, there's no question there. I don't think they are doing it only for safety. You know, I don't think they are staying in this couple just because it's safe for them and it's socially acceptable and so on. In the same time, yeah, I think it's very complicated only if we think of a benign scene, which is the one I mentioned already, the baptizing party scene, you know. And when you're a woman and you don't want to have children, and then you have all the women around you talking just about kids and how you do this and how you do that, you probably have a feeling that you don't belong. But also you can't impose that on other people. You can't say like, let's stop talking about your kids because I'm not interested. So I don't necessarily think it's, honesty is a topic there that, you know, is in the film, but I think for me it's more about acceptance and tolerance. And I think if we don't label people quickly, and if we don't like look at them and say, you're a monster, you're not a monster, I think we probably have much more to gain from this, you know, not judging instantly, trying to listen to people and to basically to understand that behind every choice, you know, there is a process and there is a journey. And I don't think we should dismiss this journey, you know, just by labeling people. And
It is brilliant how they communicate. They're so empathic towards one another. When there's this scene when she's surrounded by women, pregnant women who talk about kids, he kind of feels it, and he pulls her away, and they dance together on this tune. That is another of your techniques of framing us. You know, kind of
you don't
you.
want to frame anyone.
No,
That's
framing,
the
you know, kind
character.
of, yes, you see what I mean. I'm playing with words. But this is like a leitmotif in the film. You're this tune that I honestly I've been I have it in my mind since I watched the film, and I really love it.
It's a
Uh,
very beautiful song, and
yes.
I was really happy that we managed to. I mean, it wasn't a production that had a lot of money,
Mhm.
and it was good that we were kind of tricked into believing that the song was much cheaper. And then when we actually decided to buy it for the film, it got like 4 times more expensive than we thought in the
Oh.
beginning. So we didn't really have that money. But then the film got selected in Berlin. So we managed to go to sponsors and say, look, we have this film, it's going to be in Berlin, we need money for this song. And yeah, we were again very lucky that we found people who liked the idea and who liked the film and who helped us with this. And yeah, I think Swedish music rocks. So, yeah.
And it is a tune in English. And I noticed that when they're home at his grandma, she's listening to Romanian music. And
Mhm.
then when the two of them are talking to each other, you know, Alex, so
Mhm.
Alex, he says complicated in English, and he translates back and he says complicat. So
Mhm.
and there is some talk about staying in Romania because you love Romania, and leaving Romania and coming back. And there is she at some point when she's asked by, you know, his grandma, well, why don't you want to have children? She says, do you want to know why? So that's why I thought the film has some moments of blatant honesty that makes us breathe, because we finally hear things, you know, the way they are, you know. And she says, you know, I don't want to bring a child into this world of uncertainty and fear. Were
And
you hinting? Because for us, our audience here, we left Romania, and I think for many of us, it resonates with the pain we felt leaving and why we left. So were you trying in a way to convey anything about the Romania's wave of migration in the West? And was there any, or I'm reading too much into it because we left and we understand this layer?
no, I don't think you're reading too much. And I think there's definitely something there. I mean, you probably know this much better than I do. I left Romania for 4 years. I was in the UK and I did my studies, and then I tried to stay there for a while, and I didn't feel like I fit in. So I decided to, to leave the UK and come back to Romania. I think there is some sort of, how should I say, it is in a way the same kind of situation of feeling that you don't belong. You go to a new place and there are a lot of things that you appreciate there. Probably the rules are respected better than, let's say, in Romania, and the society is more organized. And because we're going what we're going through now with the medical system also, you have, maybe you go into a society or in a different country where the medical system is much better than the one in Romania and so on. But still there are things that, I mean, I assume this was my case. There were things that I missed a lot from Romania, and I felt one thing that I really had a problem with was the fact that every time we were going back to our childhood or like a certain background, I was realizing that I didn't have anything in common with the people I was surrounded by in the UK. There was a completely different background, and we watched completely different TV series, and the talks were completely different and so on. So yeah, I think there is a relevant subject, this comparison or this juxtaposition between, like feeling that you don't belong and leaving the country. But what Dana is saying about having children and this uncertainty, I think, to be honest, with what happened this year, now thinking of the film, because I remember I had this discussion quite a lot, and I was saying, okay, it's, you're having a child and you're putting him or her into the world, and you're trying to provide as much as you can, like, emotionally and financially and so on and so on. But still, it's a crazy world, and there are a lot of things that you are unsure of, and a lot of things that make you unsafe. And is it fair to do that to like, if you really think about it? And yeah, and then with what's happening this year, I'm thinking that, okay, it's even less safe than it used to be in 2019 when the film came out. I mean, even when I've been with this film in India, and I've been with it in Mexico, and I was supposed to come to the States, and I decided not to, which I kind of regret now. And I think it's completely crazy. It's almost like it's a completely different life. Because this year, I was like, I went with it to 2 festivals, and then I was supposed to go to Argentina with it, and that was on the 17th of March, when Argentina actually decided to close its borders with the European Union. So yeah, I think it is one of the most complicated topics in the film, because there are a lot of people who are actually having the grandmothers take on this. It's like, well, you do the children also for yourself, not just for the children. And first have the child, and then you'll see how you're juggling with it. And there are
also
other
the
people.
role of the church, because there's a baptism, and according to the Orthodox religion, you marry in order to procreate. You cannot just marry and not make children. It's
Yes,
I
and
remember I was told that many times, because I waited before I had my kids a long time, and by the time everybody gave up on us, we had kids. But
it's like some people, decide to have children later on, and some people decide to never have children. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer about this, but definitely in terms of church and in terms of religion, there is a very, very, very big pressure here in Romania. And I remember the last baptism I went to, there was the priest gave a speech which was like 20 minutes long, and it was basically a speech that was going against abortion. And I remember by the end of it, we were all feeling so uncomfortable because it was a bit like, well, look, we're at the baptism. So obviously no one had an abortion here. So why do you need to push your agenda in such a, like forceful way? And yeah, I think, it's this kind of pressure comes on more or less every level, because I mean, I don't have children, for example, and I know, I mean, being a man is probably easier for me in Romania. Not everybody asks me, when are you going to have children, or the time is ticking, or so on and so on. But I noticed that even as a man, you get a lot of questions about this, and it's like, why not? And well, it's, like, have it first and think afterwards, which is not really what I do. So
Yeah, and we do have a question in the chat here um, from Anabela Zagura. In what ways do you think this is a particularly Romanian love story? Do you see the main character's dynamic as a reflection of elements of Romanian culture?
well, I think it is a Romanian story. I think it appeals, to more people than just Romanian people, or that's the conclusion I drew from going with it to festivals and talking to people. But I think, yeah, there are definitely elements, and I would say not even Romanian. I think, is that I wouldn't see this story set in anywhere else, in any other city than Bucharest. I remember when we presented the project we went with it to several markets, and an Israeli producer came to me and Claudiu, to the Romanian producer, and he said, I will invest money in this film if you do it in Tel Aviv with Israeli actors. And I was like, I can't do that, because these characters have a certain background, and that background is, like middle class people from Bucharest with a certain culture, with a certain past. And I can't shift that. I can't put these people in Seattle and say, look,
Right.
it's like, yeah. And also Bucharest for me, is a very important character in the film. And I think, even if the topics in the film are topics that, can exist in other societies and in other countries and in other cultures and so on, I think they make the most sense to me being where they are, Bucharest, Romania.
And I do have a question from Ilana here in the chat, exactly about Bucharest. How did you choose the locations where you shot in Bucharest? Does the city, the capital, add something to the story, since the film begins with Dana coming back to Bucharest?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, some of the look, I'll tell you something. This scene is not in the film anymore. It's in the short film. When Dana was in the taxi, they were coming across Casa Radio, which is this building that Ceausescu had built right before, the Romanian Revolution. I think it was inaugurated that very year, and now, a few years ago, they decided to turn it into a shopping mall, and they cut basically the middle of it. And now you have two separate buildings in a way, like this, the right wing and the left wing, and a huge hole in the middle, this empty space in the middle. Then the company that cut this bit went bankrupt. And you have this very weird relic of the communism, like two halves completely separated, big space in between them. And the taxi was passing by this building, and Dana was looking at the building, and I was using this as a sort of metaphor for this couple, that kind of is like the same thing, but in the same time they are separated. We ended up not having that scene in the feature film anymore, but I think I looked for buildings and for streets and for spaces that were kind of a metaphor of, of this couple. And I decided to start the film at the railway station, and especially with that scene of the train arriving and lots of people getting out of the train, because for me it was important to say, look, any of these people, you know, each one of them is the character of their own film, you know, and I can pick this one or this one, but this is the person that I want to talk about. I don't think her story is more important than other people's stories, but this is what I want to talk to you about. And yeah, and otherwise I can say that there was a big nightmare with the way Bucharest is lit, because yeah, you have like sodium lights which are warm and yellowish, yellow orange, and then there are lots of streets that are illuminated with LED lights, and there is this blue stark, you know, very cutty light, and I just wanted to have a coherent look for the film. I didn't want to have like an orange scene and a cold scene.
You wanted a coherent Bucharest night.
Yeah, which was impossible. Yeah, it was impossible. And then we, you know, talking about the title again, we decided that Bucharest, in a way, is some kind of monster itself, because
Yeah.
it has, you know, like the pressure and the stress it puts on people, and the fact that it's a mix of so many things. And
I think I saw it in a tourist guide, bringing friends over, you know, to Romania. And one of their tourist guides, Bucharest was the Babylon of the East.
yeah, in a way. But I think also, you know, in terms of perception, there were a lot of people seeing the film in Romania. I mean, a lot of the people that actually saw the film in Romania who said that they've never seen Bucharest as beautiful in a film ever. And then there were people who were asking, why did you choose to portray Bucharest in such an ugly, you know, light? And it is, I mean, it is as confusing in a way as Bucharest is, because some people see it beautiful as a beautiful city, some people see it as an ugly city. A lot of the Bucharest, you know, like I was born in Bucharest. I was born in Bucharest. I've lived in Bucharest most of my life, and I have a love-hate relationship with it. I mean, there are bits that I really like about it, and but also like in terms of traffic and sometimes people and, you know, this rhythm of life, sometimes I really dread it. So yeah.
Like any capital, right? You love it, you hate it.
Well, it depends. I mean, I really like London, and I remember with London I didn't really have a
Oh,
love-hate relationship. It was more like a love relationship. So
yeah,
but I think probably it's, you know, it's also the feeling of belonging to the city that kind of,
yeah.
you know, makes me want more from it than from other cities.
I've heard people who live in Paris talk about Paris in these terms, kind of love-hate
Mhm.
relationship. We do have a question from Michelle Aoki. I was not clear whether Dana did not want to have children, or that she had been aware of Arthur's homosexuality 2 years earlier, and for that reason felt it was unsecure to bring a child into the world.
Well, I think when she's talking to the grandmother, she's being 100% honest. I think, you know, she doesn't want to have children, and she doesn't want to have children, you know, because she thinks life is very complicated, and also it's not by accident that none of their parents is being shown in the film. I mean, we kind of get a sense that Andrei's mother has died, by in a way he talks with the grandmother and so on, and also her parents, Dana's parents, are not present in the picture. So the backstory for this character for me was that she kind of felt abandoned because her parents died very early on. So she took this thought and, you know, projected it in the future and said, okay, what if I have a child, and what if I do to this child the same thing that my parents did to me? I don't think this is a safe, you know, thing. And I remember this was something I encountered in an interview that I had. I remember one of the women said to me, I know my husband loves me, despite the fact that I don't want to have children. And I think because of this, that he really loves me, because no other man would be able to love me knowing that I don't want to take his name and, you know, I mean, a way of saying, you know, like have his child. And yeah, I think she really appreciates the fact that even though she knows he wants to have children, I mean, every time they talk about this subject, he goes quiet. And also in the end of the discussion with the grandmother, you know, she gets a very clear sense of the fact that he misses not having children. But the fact that he accepts her and loves her, you know, without pushing her to have children, means a lot to her. So I think what she's saying there is very honest. I don't think his sexuality, I mean, obviously his sexuality doesn't help, and it's not like, okay, I don't want to have children, but since you're a homosexual, let's have one. But I think that she, let's say, her decision not to have children was prior the moment when she found out that, I mean, she had the clear proof that he was a homosexual.
Yeah. And I have a second question from Michelle Aoki. I felt the love between Dana and Arthur. I was not certain if there was a sex life too. Was Arthur homosexual or bisexual? Is one easier or harder for the partner?
Well, we decided that they stopped having sex a while ago. So, I mean, it depends on how you see it now. You can say, okay, since they had sex at some point, he was a bisexual. But I think, in all honesty, I would refer to him more as a homosexual, because it's like, I think he enjoys having sex and takes pleasure from it when having sex with a man. So, yeah, I mean, this was a topic that, you know, came across in our discussion, in my discussion with Judith and with Christy, quite a lot. Are they still having sex? Do they miss this? Is it, you know, is it something that really damages their relationship? But also, you know, in the discussions I had with the married couples, there were people like who were married for 10, 15 years or something like that. And they were saying, well, you know, we're having sex now like once or twice every year. So, you know, I think after a certain point, sexuality is not that important anymore. So,
Yeah, it seemed that some point you were alluding that they would have an open relationship when she said that she had sex with another man the night where he had. So I mean, I was wondering about that, if it's
yes, this was,
lies or yeah.
I mean, this was a very important discussion with the actress who played Dana before you did, because I remember she said to me at one point, I really need to know what happened right before I arrived at the train station. Did I cheat on him or didn't I? And I said, why is that important to you? And she said something that really stuck into my head. She said, if I cheated on him, I would feel that we are even and I would be more understanding towards him. If I didn't cheat on him, then I would feel like a fool, and I would, you know, I would be angry with him. And I said, for me, that's not important, because I think that even if you cheated on him, he was probably there in your head all the time, and you probably cheated just because you wanted to, how should I say, I don't know. Let's put it this way. What happened is that she was in a team building right before, you know, where the point where the film starts. And this colleague of hers started making advances, you know, and
Flirting, yeah.
sorry,
Flirting with her.
flirting, yeah, but a
More.
bit more pushy than that.
Yeah.
And at one point, he said to her, you know, we all kind of know how your marriage goes, so you might as well not pretend that this is not something that you want, which she takes as a very, you know, like strong punch, and she gets very upset about this. And that's the scene. I mean, that's not in the film,
Yeah.
but we
Is
used it as a background for the character. And yeah, I think, I mean, is definitely something that's is still important for them being in their 40s, like beginning of their 40s and so on. But for me, the film was less about this, about sexuality, and more about, you know, the journey towards each other and towards the other, knowing that he or she are not exactly what you want. And, you know, it's like, how far can you go in this direction? And I think she's a very stubborn uh, person and character, Dana. I think she,
yeah.
yeah, she, you know, because she realizes there are a lot of qualities in Arthur that she might not find somewhere else. And also, yeah, she's thinking, okay, we've been together for 8, 10 years. You know, it's like, well, what am I giving up if I? And yeah, I think she really loves him. And now we're going back to the poster. You know, I think she's
Exactly.
he's
Yeah.
loving him in a very protecting and almost like motherly way, you know,
It
instead.
is a different, an invitation to for us to question what we call love in a marriage and how it evolves and how we are supposed to. I feel like there's so much pressure on us from the movies that we see that we have to be this, you know, have this intense sexual life at all, you know, stages in life. And this is another version of, okay, this is, it evolves into this, these people are together, they have something together. I just love that the way the apartment, the new apartment, when they move in, it's not the new wave, you know, regular apartment which is like claustrophobic. And you know, we have a glimpse of that with the grandma's apartment. It's so open, it's almost, is it a house almost or something? It feels, anyway, it feels like an open space, where they move in. So even changing houses in the film, I think it's important.
Yeah, this is, I mean, if I'm going back to Ilana's question, I think the idea I had talking with Alexandra, who did the whole production design, was that we should have each apartment as a extension of the character that lives in there, and also to cover, because we start with the grandmother's apartment, which is set in the more or less in the 60s, and then we, like, communist 60s, and then we go up to 2010 2020, which is their apartment, you know, the new apartment, because their old apartment looks like a very 1980s 1990s communist building and communist apartment. So yeah, I think the space and the, you know, tells a lot about the characters. And yeah, sorry, I think I kind of went away from your question. Your
No, not at all. No, it's more of observation about space and how it opens up the story, just like the last, um, the question, why did you stay with me? Why are you staying with me? So we'll return to the present.
I
Yeah.
think that's what the film is about. And you mentioned love, and I think it's, yeah, it's how do you actually love someone, and how, you know, it's like, it's so easy to say things, to say I love you and you mean the world to me, and so it's like, why does it mean, you know, what is behind those words actually, and what do we actually call love, you know?
Mm.
Because I mean, it's very easy to say, and to say that I love, you know, this woman or this man and so on, but what, you know, what would you do to prove that, you know? And
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, if you're thinking of very problematic situations, like, you know, one of them is ill, or, you know, something happens and so on, probably, you know, a lot of us, inspired by Disney and the films that we've seen and the, you know, the stories that we heard, we would say, yeah, I will stick to, you know, to her side or his side, and I would do this and this and this. But I think, you know, like, everyday life is probably a bit less uh, what would be the word for this, of adventurous and, you know, like Disney material, but in the same time I think it can be more complicated.
Exactly, complicated. And I
Yeah.
do have a last question from Ilana. Time flies. It's so wonderful talking to you. It seems to me that you are talking about your characters like a novelist. Do you consider writing this novel and tell the whole story, filling all the gaps left open in the film?
No, I think, I mean, I think it kind of ended for me with this feature film in terms of this story, because I remember in one of the Q&A sessions, somebody said that there seems to be a lot of material there, and would I be interested to do a TV series with this topic? And I was like, no, I don't think I'll, you know, like turn it from short into feature and then from feature into TV series. And then like, I have other subjects and interests, you know, besides this one. I don't want to go with this story until the end of my life. But I'm you know, I'm really happy, and especially in the light of what happened in 2020, I feel very lucky that I managed to, you know, to find the people and to find the resources to be able to tell this story. And I think I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. So I don't really feel like, you know, going over it again and explaining and developing. And I think it's, you know, I like to think of Dana and Andreas, two people that really exist somewhere there, and now they are leading their life, you know, from the point where I left them in the film. And I'm happy that they are doing that, but I wouldn't go back. And but one thing, and I'm going to mention this in my next project, which I hope I will manage to film at some point in the future, they come back in one scene. There is this dinner scene, and you have a couple, and that couple is the two of them.
Is this,
And
I was reading somewhere that you want to make a horror film. Is this the
yeah,
horror film?
yeah, it's the
Oh,
horror film, but it's
a
like,
house that's kind of, oh, okay. Can you
yeah,
tell us a
it's a
bit about it?
horror
Because
film.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, it's a horror film, but it's not the kind of horror film, you know, with like children sticking out of boxes and ghosts and stuff like that. No, it's a story about this TV presenter who's under a lot of stress because of the political situation. He's doing this political show and so on. And his wife disappears. She just leaves him in, you know, 1 year prior the actual action in the film, the actual story. And he doesn't know what happened to her. And there is, because he's finding it more and more difficult to cope with his real life, he's starting to lead a secondary life in his dreams. And at one point he can't tell the difference anymore between what's dream material and what's real life material. And I think the horror aspect comes especially from this, you know. And again, I'm coming back to 2020, and it's, I think a lot of us are waking up these days thinking, you know, seeing someone with the mask and so on, and thinking, I don't think this is real, because it's probably
Mm,
our brains find it hard to compute that this is actually happening.
mm.
And I think this is, you know, the situation in which my character in the new film is too. It's like he finds reality so crazy that he needs this other life, you know, to feel secure in, but up to the point where this second life gets confusing. So
Wow, this is exciting. I have to admit, we had a whole edition a few years ago on Halloween of the Romanian Film Festival. It was so hard to find horror films from Romania. I mean, there were hardly any. So,
yeah, I
and
think this is another thing I'm tempted by, because it's, I mean, I told you it's not going to be like a typical horror film, but I think it's a genre that is not necessarily present in the Romanian cinema. And I would really like, I mean, I'm a fan of psychological horrorish films.
mhm.
So I will try to do this, even though it's even more complicated to raise the funds and, you know, to funding for a genre film, especially when a lot of people are thinking that, you know, Romanian cinema, it's all like slow burn, intellectual, psychological drama and so on. And when you come with a horror thriller kind of genre, they go a bit like, are you sure?
Yeah. Oh, oh,
We'll
that's
see.
an entire whole discussion about funding, right? We'll
Yeah,
have to organize another Q&A
very big
for
discussion
this.
that we're probably going to have with all the Romanian directors you're
Yeah,
going to talk with this
yeah,
week.
exactly. So we're so happy you agreed to talk to us
Well,
tonight.
it was
Thank
a
you so
pleasure,
much.
and thank you very much it was a very pleasant interview. So,
Thank you
and,
so much. And hopefully all this will be over next year and we'll be able to see
well,
you.
yeah, we can only hope that
Yeah.
this is going to be a better world for future kids.
I think we would we would love to have your horror film here anyway, so we're looking forward to it.
I can't wait to have it ready and, you know, send it to you.
Thank you. So we have a message. Thank you. Very interesting conversation and satisfying film. Thank you for a great conversation. So thank you so much, Marius.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything. We will be following you from Seattle. And for our audience, please stay tuned tomorrow. We have 3 more Q&As on Christy Puyu's film, Malmkrog, Uppercase Print, and The Soviet Garden. So we're going to have a marathon tomorrow. So
They
be
are
ready.
all
Watch the
amazing. They
films.
are all amazing films. So I hope you managed to see all of them.
Yeah,
Very
we were telling it's very hard to recommend specific films. I think everybody just have to brace themselves and do the marathon with us.
well. Malmkrog and Upper Achilles Print are definitely films to see.
Right.
So
Yeah. Thank you so much.
thank
And
you.
see you next time. Good luck with everything. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody, for
Take care.
participating. Thank you, Lena, for monitoring the chat and everybody for your questions. See you tomorrow. Bye.